And it's very telling that we're in one of the wealthiest cities in the world, in a beautiful, beautiful lecture hall, and we have one sad clock over there with a burned out battery so that no one knows what's going on. And I will try to start my timer so I don't waste everyone's time. So thank you very much. This has been a great conference as always. It's probably my 20th, as I said yesterday, I4 conference, and they're always a delight. What I want to talk about today is very much that and I don't have a PowerPoint, so you'll just have to stare at either my face or that face up there. We are in particularly perilous times, I think, in terms of higher education, both in the United States and in many ways worldwide. For many reasons, but certainly we see this manifested in diversity initiatives, which is a flashpoint in the US, being under attack. Intellectual freedom is very much under attack in the US. What we do is caricatured by politicians and in media. But it's, of course, telling that not all of us in higher ed are treated with equal scorn. No one is questioning the value of engineering education or accounting degrees. But for those of us, as many of us in the room are, who are in education, in the humanities, in arts, in languages, and even in some sciences, like theoretical physics, for instance, we're being attacked over whether what we do has any value at all. And I bring a particular passion to this. And I'll just speak very personally for a moment. As a gay kid growing up in rural Alabama, in the southern part of the United States, in a working class family, I wasn't sure that there was a livable life for me in what I saw around me. I certainly escaped, as many of us did, I suppose, into books and music, but I wasn't sure how to survive to full adulthood, given my own sense of claustrophobia and the environment of homophobia. Coming to a university as a first-generation student was my desperate attempt at an escape that was not self-destructive. Having had a year of German studies in high school, I found in my foreign languages classes at university a small community of misfits like me, lovers of language and books and people who thought of world travel and culture and cultural diversity. The students and professors there opened my eyes to the richness of the global community of ideas and provided the life raft I needed to find my way out of an unlivable for me life that I saw around me. My studies in language and culture led to everything I've experienced since then. Teaching stints across the world and Fulbright Awards and tenured positions at 5 different universities now, deanships and now a provostship. German studies and cultural studies arguably saved my life, and most certainly gave me the life that I have today. So what does that have to do with conferences like the one we are here today at, and why they matter so much in today's political climate? And I think that returns us to the question of the very purpose of higher education. Is it to train students mechanically for specific vocational tracks? If it is that, then why do we have universities? All we need are micro-credentials and many training programs to teach people very specific skills. Or is it to take young adults, or those of any age, on a journey of consciousness broadening, of deepening understanding of the complexities of the world around, and of growing their potential for being able to intervene in the most pressing crises that we're confronted with, and with creativity and ability to see the world from a variety of viewpoints, as we talked about yesterday, and with an awareness of the diverse needs of others. I argue, of course, that that is the work of universities, and that is the work of an organization like iF4. And in using that word, diverse viewpoints, diversity, we, of course, hit upon one of the flashpoints, as I said, in American higher education. But that term actually captures much of what we do and study in the humanities, in arts and language education, the diversity of perspectives, of thought, and of culture. In several of my books and in various talks I've given around the world and at these conferences, I've made that idea of diversity of thought very much a centerpiece of what I have talked about, and it was very much in keeping with what Marcelo talked about yesterday, in being comfortable and even enjoying what we don't know. My own particular reference point for this has been, often the celebrated German philosopher Hans-Georg Gadamer, whom many of you probably don't know, but in his big book, Truth and Method, Wahrheit und Methode in German, he made that concept of confrontation of perspectives, the clash of different worldviews, central to his diagnosis of how change occurs and how we learn from one another. Only through encounters with difference do we learn anything about our own limitations, our own mistakes, and indeed ourselves. Those in the US who would shut down diversity offices, ban discussions of difference, and silence dissent are in effect opposing the very process of learning itself. They're proponents and defenders of stasis, one might imagine, even regression, but not of conservatism, which values incremental change. The individuals who would shut these sort of offices and these sorts of initiatives down actually want to kill the generation of new knowledge. This has everything to do, of course, with the denigration and defunding of the arts and humanities in the US today. In reading, in studying different cultures, in learning new languages, we confront our own ignorance. We open ourselves up to worldviews that are unlike our own and perhaps even challenge our own. When I read a novel, a poem, or immerse myself in a film, I give up the sanctity of my own horizon, that which I know, and let that of another, author, artist, whatever, fill me with uncertainty about what I know and what is true. That is why most forms of art are so scorned by fascists and would-be autocrats. It challenges the very concept of static truth, of political and religious fundamentalism. It's why what we do in the fields of education, arts, and humanities is so essential to the work of a university, but it's also so inherently dangerous. And that brings me to the sort of short example I want to give, and that is of university destruction. And that's of one of my former employers, West Virginia University. I spent 7 years there as a distinguished professor, a chair of the Modern Languages Department, eventually the chair of the English Department from 2004 and 2011. WVU, as it's called, West Virginia University, is the flagship university public institution in a very poor state, West Virginia in Appalachia, which has been very hard hit as its economy, which is based on coal, has fell on, obviously very hard times because fossil fuels being out of favor at the moment. Still, when I was there in the early noughts, WVU was well funded and stable enough to embark on an ambitious strategic planning process that I was part of at the university level, and that it hoped would lead to national recognition as a research and teaching powerhouse. Fast forward to last year. Facing a $45 million budget shortfall, WVU fired all of its tenured language professors, eliminated its art history program and major, and eliminated over 100 other faculty lines. The reasons are unfortunately tragic, but actually rather few. A right-wing state government that slashed funding to the university to pay for tax cuts for businesses, a demand then that the university pay its own way by increasing student enrollment from around 30,000 students when I was there to 40,000, which necessitated a building craze to create new dormitory and classroom spaces, but without a message or value proposition that would yield an extra 10,000 students, given the fact that there was actually a population decrease in the state and in the region. The current enrollment at West Virginia University is around 18,000 students. Now they're in a predictable death spiral. Fewer programs, leading to fewer interested students, wanting to come there, leading to fewer options, leading to further decreases in programs, and continuing decline in student interest reduced, around the reduced offerings of the university. Why would anyone want to attend a university where you can't even take a French class if you would like to? And inevitably, while there were parallel enrollment declines across the campus, the humanities and the arts were targeted for the most dramatic cuts because they were seen as the most frivolous, even though their faculty salaries were the lowest on campus. So you had to fire twice as many language professors as you would an engineering or an accounting professor to reap the same savings. In an environment of right-wing politics where leaders do not believe in the worth of reading fiction and poetry, in studying world languages, or exposing oneself to Picasso or non-Western art, as many of us do, I hope, in this room, we and our students suffer the consequences of inept, even criminally neglectful administrative leadership. Interestingly, WVU is being held up as a model for what other states could and should do with their universities. But for many of us, it's a harbinger of the horrors that may occur across the United States. But I will say politics of this sort make for odd but potentially very helpful bedfellows, so to speak. The anti-humanities agenda of some right-wing politicians actually, quite often mirrors their anti-science agenda too, especially in a place like West Virginia University, which is surrounded by a political cacophony of climate change deniers. All forms of new knowledge generation are seen as equally threatening to the idea of a kind of univocal, monologic, static truth, sometimes a religiously sanctioned truth. And that's where I would urge all of us in the disciplines like the arts, humanities, language education, education generally, to find common ground with those around us who we often see as opposing in an opposing camp. Our colleagues in some of the natural sciences, in the health sciences, even in business. As provost now, as executive vice president, I found some of the strongest allies of the liberal arts to be in departments and faculties seemingly far removed from the humanities, because they too are interested in new knowledge generation and are not afraid of innovation and change, and they understand the necessity for that. We have to remind all who will listen that diversity of thinking, approach, and background is an essential good, and that it is necessary for all learning and discovery. That diverse businesses are more successful than non-diverse ones, that diverse laboratories are more successful than non-diverse ones, that the ability to speak or at least appreciate a different language allows one an ability to cross boundaries in ways that are profitable economically as well as enriching personally. So I beat a constant drum at my home university of learning the tactics that will help us as we battle ignorance, fear, and retrograde agendas. We have to play on the terrain of, I would even say, vocational utility. Humanities studies and language studies are vocationally useful, and we should not be ashamed of reminding people of that. We have to understand our students and their parents' anxieties, and we touched on this yesterday in one of the discussions, around employability, about actually being able to get a job, but we have to talk about how what we do actually makes our students more employable, because they're able to see the world in new and creative ways and generate new knowledge. I would say, especially those of us who are very privileged, holding administrative positions or with job security, whether tenure or otherwise, we have a responsibility to push back carefully but relentlessly against those who are anti-science, anti-arts, anti-diversity. And again, it would be wrong to call them conservative, because they are indeed just retrograde. So we have to be, if you think about it, what they're wanting to go back to or what they're wanting to preserve, in fact, is a past that was horrifically racist, horrifically homophobic, horrifically sexist, etc. And they don't even understand what traditional education, if you want to think about it as traditional, means, because Bildung in German, that concept of education is about creating the whole person, not about learning a technical track. But it's not a call to martyrdom. We can't defend anything in academia if we lose our jobs, but it is a call to tacticality, to doing the work of what I referred to yesterday, what Foucault called the specific intellectual, using our spaces within the academy to create incremental change around us, and working with colleagues, with administrators, with parents, and even with politicians if needed to carry this message. So I certainly don't want to, end on a note of pessimism, because I do think that we can find allies in many, many places. We have a very powerful story to tell about how, again, language learning expands consciousness and allows one to cross barriers in a way that simply typing in into a translation app doesn't really work. It allows one actually to, negotiate and understand the perspectives of others. We should be master communicators. We're all trained in communication. We have to be willing to explain why what we do is important, and to do so in ways that are understandable to non-specialists. We have to take the work of a conference like this, and I've said this many times on a stage like this, we have to take this work back home with us, back to our campuses, back to our colleagues, back to our administrators, to explain the use of interdisciplinarity, internationalism, and interculturalism. I'm not pessimistic, but I am realistic. One of the things I did, as I mentioned yesterday, throughout my life, is work in political activism, and one of the organizations I worked with was an AIDS activist organization called ACT UP back in the 90s and early 2000s. And their famous slogan is "Silence equals death." And we cannot remain silent, because this is a moment where I believe, the very life of what we do at a university is on the line. So I'll end there, and happy to talk through anything you would like to talk through, but thank you.
Okay, we have 10 minutes for questions.
Yep.
Any questions, comments? There's one person right at the back there.
Thank you for that presentation. It was very good. And your background, you probably are aware of the similar issues that occurred at the University of Akron.
Yes.
80 programs were gutted. 1 out of every 5 programs was destroyed. And they did this in part because the president of the university had created a $25 million shortfall and then left. And so they had to bring a guy in who was the hatchet man. He made the programs unpopular. We lost a lot of enrollment. And then they did what they called a faculty-driven examination of numbers. And so they took the downplay in enrollment that occurred because of these program cuts and used that as a justification to get rid of these other programs. I was right in the middle of my doctoral dissertation work when they got rid of my program entirely.
Yep.
And myself and a number of other people were suddenly told, you need to finish now or go someplace else. And there is a trail of destruction that is coming with this.
Right.
Not just simply from the standpoint of what you're talking from the university side, but from the legislative side as well. In my home state of Ohio, we have a bill right now that's going to say you can't say the word slavery. You can't talk about it in the schools. And especially now, because STEM is such an important aspect of education, more than ever, we really have to rally the call about the importance of the background that we have in the humanities. The students that we have at my university.
Sorry, is there a question for
took them out,
Professor?
The university. Yeah, my question is, when you have these small rural states,
Right.
how do we get that message to our legislators that we actually matter?
You know, there's so many factors at play in terms of what's happening in public education in the U.S. right now. One of them is the fact that I'm going to use the example of the state of New York because Binghamton University, as Joe mentioned, is part of the SUNY system, and we are a 64 campus system that involves 4 different PhD granting institutions, but then a lot of regional institutions and also community colleges. There are more campuses than there is student demand for those campuses. We have to think very carefully in higher education about what to do with, the fact that in many states there are too many universities or campuses given a shrinking population. That does not mean, though, that what we do at universities has to be brutal or in any way non-consultative, and certainly should not be driven by politicians making, ignorant decisions, just to be frank with you, about what they think is vocationally useful. I will say that back when I was in West Virginia at WVU, I would be in Charleston, the capital of the state, actually meeting with legislators. I think those of us who, again, have, the security so that we're not risking our jobs, and I don't want people to risk their jobs, but those of us who have some security in our jobs, we need to be in front of actual legislators, talking to them in the ways that I've just mentioned about why what we do is important. Not just because it's nice to study a piece of art or a piece of music, but that the study of art, as we know, Steve Jobs studied calligraphy at Reed College and attributed, because he's passed, attributed to those studies his ability to think in new ways about what computer programming could be. So this is incredibly generative, and I think we need to be able to tell our stories very powerfully to the people who actually make the decisions. Oh, Ryan.
Hi, thank you so much for this incredible eye-opening talk. I really appreciate it. So my name is Noreen Hall, and my background is in AI and machine learning. So I'm a very technical person, and I'm on purpose here to learn everything else. And I think at this point, it's no secret that AI will fundamentally change how we learn and work together.
Mm-hmm.
And in that context, my hypothesis is that the very human skills like communication, collaboration, and art and science is what's going to be the most critical skills of the future work as we go into this AI accelerated workspace. And, a lot of the technical jobs like coding will be taken over by AI. And so our jobs as humans will be really connecting the dots and really being accelerated with these technical skills, but also have that human skills to be able to work together in this new environment. I'm just curious, what's your take on that? And I think my understanding is that we need to double down on humanities, not
Absolutely.
let them go.
Thank you. No, I agree with you completely. And, I was up at University of Warwick a couple of days ago when we were talking about, collaborations in AI and some other technical fields, but they are very much doubling down in their commitment to the arts and sciences, the liberal arts and sciences, because of that very thing. The mechanical part of this is going to become very, very easily sort of, handled by non-human actors, which should be a relief to us, because what it allows us to do is actually do the creativity part of it, the new thinking part of it, handle the communication, the negotiation, the actual, sort of hands-on soft skills that really the arts and humanities live and die by. So, thank you. I agree with that comment completely.
Hello, sir. I'm Cordelia Yates from Morningside University. And as you were speaking and talking about the elimination of the humanity program, I don't know if you remember the Wesleyan University closed down too, and students had to be re-enrolled in other colleges. And I know some of them came to my university. One of the key things that crossed my mind, because you were talking about advocacy for this humanity programs. Are you aware of AACTE? Are you a part of AACTE association?
No. Tell me
Okay,
what is-
because the AACTE, which has to do with all American universities, college teacher education, perhaps that could become a forum where you could, if you join the organization, because this kind of important issues normally are brought up, and I know that we also go to Washington to advocate for some of these issues that you brought up. If you join the association, you could bring this up to become a team for the conference. And at the same time, when we do create the opportunities to go to Washington to meet with the legislators to advocate for colleges, higher institutions in America, you could make a strong case in the legislative house, and at the same time, you could make a strong case during the AACTE conference, which we have one coming up, which is going to be
Do you have a
February
question?
next year in California. So perhaps you want to bring this up there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellent.
There is up where?
Just way up there.
Go on then. We have 2 minutes.
Professor Hall, a wonderful
Yes.
talk once again. I'm from north of the border,
Yes.
from where you are, and we spend a lot of time in front of legislators as academics talking about what it is that we do and why we're important. However, we have found that the best advocates for what we do in the humanities, social sciences, as well as engineering and other sciences are not us, but our colleagues in the public and private sectors.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you could talk maybe a little bit about how we get others to advocate on our behalf. And one organization close to you, IBM at Watson, is a really good example of the private sector speaking on behalf of the humanities, social sciences, as well as science and engineering.
I agree completely. And I think that, one of the underutilized sort of avenues for advocacy is actually with, you've pointed in this direction, our most successful alumni. Because the individuals who are exiting, my own field is English studies, English literature, or philosophy departments or history departments. Some of them have become incredibly successful in business careers or political careers or, elsewhere, nonprofits, etc. And to have those first-person narratives out there, whether they're on our websites or in social media or whatever, is invaluable, because the fear of parents who vote for politicians is that if my child studies French literature, that somehow they're going to be a failure. Joe was a proud sort of student of French literature, and he has been enormously successful. Many of our graduates have been, and we need their narratives captured in ways that we can show to politicians and show to prospective students and their parents, so that we don't end up in this death spiral of declining. I would say artificially created declining demand. Okay. I think I've been given the signal.